Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. President Trump and world leaders gathering in Washington today to pay tribute to the late Senator Lindsey Graham. The events beginning with a ceremony at the Capitol, followed by a service at Washington National Cathedral this afternoon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House today for separate meetings with President Trump. What we know so far. Newly declassified documents show Chinese influence in the 2020 elections, what the Chinese regime sought to exploit leading up to the presidential race. Powerful earthquake strikes southern Japan, trapping people in a collapsed mall and triggering a major emergency response.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Tuesday, July 28th. I'm Stephanie Cox. President Trump meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. The high-stakes meeting comes as the administration says negotiations continue between the U.S. and Iran. NTD White House correspondent Iris Tao has the update.
President Trump is meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu right behind us inside the Oval Office. And the Israeli Prime Minister, meanwhile, is expected to present President Trump with evidence and intelligence showing that Iran is actively expanding its nuclear site. This morning, the president telling Fox News that the U.S. Space Force actually has the intelligence and ability to really monitor Iran's nuclear sites, and that he says they know exactly what's going on at Iran's Pickaxe Mountain. Of course, it remains to be seen whether today's meeting will bring any changes to the U.S. posture and whether the U.S. will actually step up strikes to further target Iran's nuclear sites. But at least for now, the U.S. and Iran are on a pause of strikes after some almost 2 weeks of intense back and forth attacks between the two countries. Now, President Trump yesterday saying that Iran requested the pause in strikes as, of course, now there is more space for peace talks to continue. Here's what he said to watch.
Well, Iran took a beating over the last 14 days, and they asked us very nicely, please stop. Let's meet. And that's what we are right now. See what happens. If we don't make a deal, we go back to the same thing.
And now there have been reports saying how the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu would want the U.S. to continue with a tougher stance against Iran. And President Trump, who of course is saying that he's allowing peace talks to continue, this morning telling Fox News that while they have a little difference, while he and Netanyahu have a little difference, they're pretty close and essentially still on the same page. Meanwhile, he's also acknowledging that some among Republicans would like him to, quote, finish the job, but he's also expressing concerns for the Iranian people, saying that if the U.S. actually goes ahead and destroys Iran's power plants as well as bridges and other infrastructure, it could take very long to rebuild. But he's also refreshing his warning. Let's take a look.
I think about 91 million people without power, without bridges, would have to live. And it's a very, very delicate balance. Yeah. So I think we have a very strong position right now. They know I'm going to do that if they don't make a deal. The bridges are going to be gone. Literally in less than, I would say in 2 hours, most of the bridges.
Meanwhile, President Trump's meeting with Netanyahu comes directly after his meeting earlier this morning with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And that meeting also comes after Ukraine had hit an Iranian ship, underscoring how potentially closer the war in Iran and the war in Ukraine could be getting. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Iris, for that report. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he had a productive meeting with President Trump at the White House. In a social media post, Zelensky thanked President Trump for working with Ukraine to protect lives and advance peace. He also offered condolences on the death of Senator Lindsey Graham, calling him a true friend of Ukraine. Zelensky said the two leaders discussed licenses for the production of Patriot missile interceptors, along with other ideas to strengthen Ukraine's defense. They also talked about diplomacy, Zelensky saying, quote, "It's important that diplomatic processes be reinvigorated. Our teams will arrange the details of their further communication." The Ukrainian president also thanking the United States for its continued support of Ukraine. And hundreds of lawmakers gathering at the U.S. Capitol Rotunda for the late Senator Lindsey Graham's memorial service today. Vice President J.D. Vance, as president of the Senate, delivering a speech honoring Graham.
He saw that the Senate, at its very worst, could be a venue for character assassination. But because he loved people, he saw that the Senate, at its very best, could be a deliberative body geared towards persuading people. And that's what Lindsey Graham did in that case and in so many others. So I choose to remember Lindsey Graham as a man who could disagree with you without being disagreeable. I choose to remember Lindsey Graham as a person who could fight with you on one issue, but fight for you on another issue. I remember Lindsey Graham as a man who loved people. And because he loved people, he was willing to reason with them, to respect them, and ultimately to persuade. It was impossible not to like him. That swashbuckling, infectious laugh, that attitude, that passion that so many others have talked about. Lindsey Graham was impossible not to like as a human being and, of course, as a United States Senator.
U.S. Air Force bands played as Graham's flag-draped coffin stood in the rotunda in a nod to his military service. Graham died suddenly from a heart ailment on July 11th at age 71. In his decades-long career in Congress, Graham had been a vocal defender of U.S. national security and supporter of Israel and Ukraine. His funeral will be held at the Washington National Cathedral later today. President Trump is expected to speak. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky are also set to attend. Following today's ceremonies in D.C., Graham will have funeral services tomorrow in his home state of South Carolina, where he will be buried. Joining us for insight on the late Senator Lindsey Graham is former White House staffer and now author and historian Jane Hampton Cook. Great to have you with us today, Jane. Now, the service today drawing many big names, both nationally and internationally. What do you see as the markers of some of Senator Graham's legacy on the political stage?
I can't think of another time when a senator died and world leaders came to his funeral. I mean, that's pretty astounding. And that just goes to show you that he was great at building relationships. And I remember I was in a green room about to do some TV at one of the other networks, and he came in and the whole energy of the room changed. We'd all been kind of quiet, and all of a sudden he comes in like a fireball, a ball of energy, took off his jacket and just started talking to everyone. He was incredibly friendly, and he had no need to, but that he loved people. It was infectious, his love for people. And I think that's what you've seen today so far. And the lawmakers, Vice President Vance, really, speaking from the heart about his friendship with Lindsey, but also how Lindsey worked. And just, he was a tireless worker. He would go on trips abroad over the weekend and would come back and tell his fellow lawmakers what he had discovered and learned. And he just was tireless. And I think that's a big part of his legacy, is his work ethic.
Yeah, already today the proceedings have been quite touching, and in the days just following the late senator's passing, it was so clear that Lindsey Graham had touched the hearts of those he worked with. What do we know of some of his key alliances that he built up over time?
Well, we know that he had a great friendship with John McCain, and they were working on the Ukraine issue, decades ago. We know that he could reach across the aisle. I'm not exactly sure who he would tap across the aisle, but what really stands out to me is when he was the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee and they were discussing Brett Kavanaugh's nomination for the Supreme Court. And Lindsey Graham probably gave his finest moment of being a firebrand, and he just stood up for Brett Kavanaugh because he didn't like what he was seeing, this man being tarnished in this way. And he reminded his fellow Democrats that he, his Democrat friends, I should say, that he had voted for Democratic justices on the Supreme Court. So he led by example in that moment. You couldn't question him that he had lived what he was preaching at that time to the Democrats on the Senate. And something else that really stands out to me just about his communication skills is that when he would talk on TV, he would address a specific audience. He would say, to my fellow Republicans, and then he would give them his talking point. To my fellow Democrats, I would say this. To my fellow citizens, I would say this. And so he, we know that politicians often talk to more than one audience at a time, but he would clearly identify what his message was to the different groups that he was talking to about whatever issue it was. And I think that's one reason why President Trump has relied on him at times behind the scenes to go lobby for some of the things that the president needs the Senate to do.
Also showcasing that element of inclusion and compassion for all of the people that he's serving. Now, Graham's most recent work, as you've alluded to, he's been looking at Ukraine for many years, but the most recent work was, of course, focused on increasing sanctions on Russia for its war in Ukraine. And even now, still there's a growing bipartisan group of senators pushing for that legislation, a revamped version, and changing the name of the legislative package to honor Graham and hopefully get it passed through. How do you see his place in efforts to end this war now and continuing?
Well, I think at first they thought that that legislation might die because he had passed away, but instead they've used it to honor him and to motivate people to support it because he had largely authored the material in the bill. And I think that that may help speed up maybe into the war in Ukraine and Russia by putting these sanctions on Russia. And he was definitely, a national security hawk and had very strong views on when it came to American foreign policy. And he was clearly on the side of Ukraine in this conflict and war, this terrible war that they have had for several years now. And, we have another Senator Graham now. His sister is filling in his spot. And then she's also running to permanently, or I shouldn't say permanently, but to be elected in her own right. And I didn't know the story of his family. I didn't know that he'd grown up in a room behind a pool hall. One room, for a family of 4. And then his parents died early, and he found himself taking care of a teenage sister. He ultimately adopted her, which helped with insurance for her. And he took care of her. He'd come home from college on the weekends and he'd spend time with her and he'd run, the family business. And I didn't know any of that about his story. And I didn't realize he had this kind of rags to riches rise in politics. I didn't know that he came from such humble beginnings. And I think that story really resonates with me as we, look at the new Senator Graham and as she picks up the mantle and serves her nation. And she has kind of a quiet presence, but it's a very strong presence. And I think that I'm excited to see what happens in the unfolding months when it comes to Senator Graham.
Yes, this story still continues. And building on what you've just reflected on, any comments here on parallels within the nation's history, how it mourns and how very public political figures passing impacts the public more broadly, especially as we learn more about Lindsey Graham's life and as you're reflecting yourself, how it impacts you?
Well, I wrote a book called American Phoenix about John Quincy Adams, and John Quincy Adams' birthday was July 11, which is the day that Senator Graham passed away. And, probably not many people even thought of that, but I've been studying John Quincy Adams, and he was in the House of Representatives after he was president. And he died a few days after having a stroke on the floor of the House of Representatives. And so I kind of think that what happened with John Quincy Adams is a lot of what we're seeing now. People really looking back at his legacy, not just in the House of Representatives, but as president, as a diplomat, looking back on someone's career, someone who was well respected. So I see parallels in that way. When a lawmaker, the Senate or the House has lost one of their own, you hear things and stories that you didn't have any clue about before. And I think John Quincy Adams had that kind of reflection on his life when he passed away. And then we've seen, that of course with Senator Graham.
Well, it's great to be here with you and reflect on that time now. And of course, there's much more to come in the hours later today. We'll be looking out for that. Thank you for your time today, Jane Hampton Cook.
Thank you.
And calls are mounting on Capitol Hill for senators to skip August recess to hold a prolonged debate on the Save America Act. President Trump weighing in as the Senate leader pushes back. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
Several senators are joining in a push to skip their weeks-long recess to debate the Save America Act.
6 months now. We'll turn back to the Save America Act when we've got time, if we've got time. And then as we get closer and closer to August, the message is turning to, oh, we'd love to, but can't because we're out of time.
Senator Lee is leading an effort to vote against starting the August recess at the end of this week. Several Republicans have chimed in with support, while some are doubling down on opposition. Senator John Cornyn telling reporters that the Utah Republican is demoralizing our base of voters.
And if that's now the standard, that we all just have to agree anytime there's a planned recess that we're going to take it, and that anyone who suggests that we even have a vote on that is wrong, that is crazy.
Lee has pushed for months to hold a so-called talking filibuster, a push that would give Republicans the chance to wear down Democrats through prolonged debate. Senate Leader John Thune saying it's not a one-way street.
But you turn control of the floor over to the Democrats. It's not only unlimited debate, it's unlimited amendments. And the Democrats will have a long list of amendments.
The president on Monday doubling down on the need to pass the act, which would require proof of citizenship to register to vote and voter ID at the polls.
You read recently in New Jersey where tremendous numbers of people were found out that they were on the voter rolls totally illegally, and that's all over the country. That's nothing compared to what's going on in California and Minnesota and so many other states.
He's once again calling on senators to eliminate the filibuster.
It's fine. I have a good relationship with John Thune. He's just got to get his job done. You got to get the Save America Act passed. Or better than that would be the filibuster. If you terminate the filibuster, everything happens.
Several Republican senators say they're unwilling to end the filibuster. Republicans are currently working on a party line approach to approve some elements of the Save America Act through a grant program. It would incentivize states to adopt proof of citizenship and voter ID. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Coming up, Dr. Anthony Fauci is set to testify before Congress tomorrow as scrutiny grows over newly released COVID-era diary entries and his pandemic-era decisions. Newly declassified documents showing Chinese influence in the 2020 elections, what the Chinese regime sought to exploit leading up to the presidential race. Welcome back. Newly declassified documents show the Chinese regime sought to influence the 2020 presidential election. Acting Director of National Intelligence Bill Pulte releasing the files today. Declassified government records say that China tried to utilize cyber operations to sway public opinion against the Trump administration ahead of the 2020 elections. The operations were designed to exploit U.S. social fissures, especially racial tensions and partisan disagreements. The files goes on to say the Chinese regime resorted to social media, including TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter, to project these tensions. Another declassified file is from the National Intelligence Council in January 2020. It reads, "We judge that U.S. adversaries, including at a minimum Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, as well as non-state groups, have the capability to compromise U.S. election infrastructure for the 2020 presidential election." The release of the documents comes amid President Trump's push for stricter election rules. The acting director of national intelligence also announcing today that he's cut 30% of the workforce of the intelligence community. He calls this the fifth and near final round of terminations. Pulte says, quote, "The intelligence community must protect the American people, not the political whims of the bloated and corrupt elite class." Next, Dr. Anthony Fauci is set to testify tomorrow before the Senate Homeland Security Committee. He was subpoenaed by Senator Rand Paul. This comes as Fauci's private COVID-era diaries continue to draw scrutiny. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says the diaries were found across 11 separate government servers. Speaking on Fox News.
The worst part is that giddy narcissism that you see throughout the diary is juxtaposed against really bad public health decisions. So his focus was on self-promotion, clearly, and nobody can read these diaries and say this is a political response. His focus was on promoting himself, on getting on TV, and not doing public health.
Kennedy says the diaries reveal significant differences between Fauci's private assessments and his public statements on the origins of COVID-19 and pandemic policies. The documents have been turned over to Senators Rand Paul and Ron Johnson as part of their ongoing investigation into the government's COVID-19 response. Paul says any false statements made under oath during Wednesday's testimony would not be covered by Fauci's preemptive presidential pardon. The diaries also include references to meetings with high-profile actors and comedians. In one entry dated May 21, 2020, Fauci wrote that he was the most famous and talked about person in the country and one of the most recognizable people in the world. Dr. Fauci has not responded to requests for comment. Here's President Trump on Fox News this morning, commenting on Fauci and the COVID-19 response.
Had I taken his advice, the whole country would have been closed down, and much of the country was open because I didn't close it down. What I did do, though, is with Operation Warp Speed, is we got things done that nobody's ever seen in terms of all of the gear necessary, and we learned that the cupboards were bare. You know, when I took over, we had none of this. We didn't have the ventilators.
I know
we didn't have anything. We ended up becoming the #1 ventilator producer, and we were supplying ventilators to other countries by the time we got going, and we did a great job. No, but I was not a believer because he said everybody has to wear a mask. Then he said don't wear a mask. You remember it was a whole thing. Wear them, don't wear them. I said, what are you doing? He started off saying don't wear them. Then he said wear them. Then he said don't wear them. And I lost a lot of respect for him during the period of time. Right. But I inherited him. He's been there since the 1980s. I mean, he was a guy that was there that I inherited. And with time, I didn't mind him. I didn't find him to be bad, you know, personally as a person. But I didn't agree with what he was saying or what he was doing. And when Biden came in, he inherited him, and he gave him a tremendously high position. And then he gave him a pardon.
The Senate has advanced President Trump's nominee, Jay Clayton, to serve as Director of National Intelligence. Lawmakers voted 51-43 to move his nomination forward, setting up a final confirmation vote expected this evening. Clayton is a former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. He currently serves as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. His nomination cleared the Senate Intelligence Committee last week in a 9-8 vote. If confirmed, Clayton would lead the nation's 18 intelligence agencies and serve as the president's top advisor on intelligence matters. Bryan Kohberger, the man convicted of killing 4 University of Idaho students in 2022, wants to take back his guilty plea and go to trial. That's according to comments he made to the New York Times in an interview from prison. Kohberger filed a post-conviction relief form in Idaho courts yesterday. He blamed his plea on false promises and wrong information. He was convicted last year after pleading guilty in open court and admitting to the murders. He was sentenced to life without parole. And we have an update on the deadly shooting in Seattle that killed 3 people on Sunday. Police now believe at least 3 people opened fire. Investigators say the gunfire may have been gang-related, with 2 groups exchanging shots in the middle of the crowded festival. The 15-year-old suspect remains in juvenile detention while prosecutors review possible charges. Police believe another shooter died at the scene. They're continuing their search for at least one other unidentified suspect. 3 people were killed, including the 19-year-old suspected shooter. 4 others, including a 2-year-old boy, were wounded and later released from the hospital. The shooting erupted during the annual 3-day festival, which draws about 350,000 people each year. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani has published a list of property owners who could face the city's pied-à-terre tax, the city's Department of Finance setting up a database. The list includes property owners' name and addresses. The tax went into effect earlier this month and applies to all unoccupied non-primary residences in the city worth $1 million or more. New York Governor Kathy Hochul proposed the tax to help New York City address its $5.4 billion budget deficit. Mamdani has called for a higher income tax on millionaires and corporations to help close the gap. People who reside outside the city, whether in upstate New York, another state, or abroad, are subject to the tax. Critics say the tax is likely to drive wealthy residents and jobs out of the city, and are also questioning the public display of names and addresses. And Apple is launching a new program that would allow customers to lease some of its products without buying them. The plan would replace Apple's current iPhone upgrade program, which allowed customers to swap out iPhones for a newer version after making 12 monthly payments. The new leasing offer applies to the iPhone 17 and Air models, starting at $18 a month, as well as the Apple Watch Series 11 and Ultra 3. Customers would be able to lease those products for either 12 or 24 months. Macs and iPads will have a 24 to 36-month lease term. Leasing options are available at retail stores online and in the App Store. The move comes at a time when electronics are getting more expensive and consumers are holding on to their devices longer. It's also ahead of Apple's new iPhone launch in September. That's expected to include its first foldable iPhone, Apple's most expensive iPhone yet. Johnson & Johnson has agreed to settle lawsuits alleging its baby powder and other talc products caused ovarian cancer. The company saying the settlement will resolve about 69,000 cases consolidated in federal court. Last week, a federal judge asked plaintiffs to prove a direct link between the company's product and cancer, or he would dismiss the lawsuits. J&J has denied that its talc products caused cancer, saying that talc was safe and did not contain asbestos. The company stopped selling talc-based baby powder in the U.S. in 2020. The $5.5 billion settlement ends a decade-long legal battle. As part of the agreement, J&J will make an initial payment of no more than $3 billion next year. No additional payments will be due until 2028. Severe weather in parts of the Midwest. A tornado in eastern Wisconsin leaves a trail of damage after tearing through several communities. Severe thunderstorms with damaging winds hit other parts of the region as well. Here are the details.
The house started shaking and I was like, oh, this is really serious. So yeah, I broke down because, I was just alone.
A Wisconsin resident recounting the terrifying moments a tornado ripped through her town on Monday.
I know I had to get in the basement, but I was hiding in a small room where we put our shoes. That's when I started praying, and I'm glad God heard my prayer to protect my mom.
The devastating twister ripped through parts of Menasha and Appleton, Wisconsin, damaging homes, uprooting trees, and knocking out power for thousands of customers. In the aftermath, communities are pulling together.
The neighbors are really good about everything. It's a nice cohesive group. Here, people stepped in to do what they could do.
Neighbors helping neighbors, working together as their communities recover.
We had a tornado. That's not important. This stuff right here, all these people coming together, that's what's important.
Severe weather hit other parts of the Midwest too, including Illinois. In Chicago, heavy rain caused flooding. Video showed cars stuck in high water, drivers forced to leave their vehicles behind.
The water just started rising all of a sudden, and there was no going back because there was a lot of cars behind me.
The first round of storms in Chicago hit so suddenly that 2 contractors got trapped in a storm sewer. As of Monday night, crews had managed to rescue one of the workers.
Coming up, Keiko Fujimori takes office as Peru's first elected female president, signaling a continued conservative shift in Latin America. And South Korean officials evacuate residents near a U.S. military base after a reported white phosphorus leak. A magnitude 7.1 earthquake hit southern Japan. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi is urging residents in Kumamoto Prefecture to evacuate.
To those in areas that experienced strong shaking, the risk of building collapses and landslides remains high. Please avoid entering dangerous areas and take all precautions to ensure your safety. Over the next week or so, please remain alert for the possibility of earthquakes with a maximum seismic intensity of 7.
Local media reported that dozens of people have been injured. The earthquake also knocked out power to thousands of homes and damaged roads. Some are trapped inside a partially collapsed shopping mall. Authorities have instructed roughly 300,000 residents to head to evacuation centers. Takaichi added that military personnel have been deployed to assist with rescue operations. Aftershocks continue in the region, about 540 miles southwest of Tokyo. We'll have more as this story develops. French authorities, meanwhile, ordered nearly 4,000 people evacuated today from tourist sites along the Atlantic coast. This as rising heat threatened firefighters' efforts to contain a massive wildfire west of Bordeaux. The Gironde blaze has burned about 420 square kilometers, an area 4 times the size of Paris. More than 220,000 people have been forced to flee. Officials say the fire is stabilized but not extinguished, and higher temperatures and lower humidity are raising concerns over new flare-ups. In neighboring Spain, wildfires have displaced more than 100,000 people, and the country is preparing for its 4th heat wave of the summer. Some areas are expected to approach 105 degrees. And South Korean officials briefly ordered residents to evacuate today. The move followed a reported white phosphorus leak at a U.S. military base near Seoul. Authorities urged people living near Osan Air Base to move to safety and avoid skin exposure after the leak was detected. The evacuation order was lifted hours later after officials said decontamination work was completed. The U.S. Air Force said it established a safety cordon following a ground mishap, but did not confirm a white phosphorus leak. No major disruptions or injuries were reported. Keiko Fujimori is being sworn in as Peru's first elected female president, marking another shift toward conservative leadership in Latin America. Fujimori's victory comes as voters across the region express frustration over rising crime, political instability, and economic challenges. Fujimori is the daughter of former President Alberto Fujimori. She returns one of Peru's most influential political families to power after years of failed campaigns. The younger Fujimori has signaled closer cooperation with President Trump's administration, including interest in joining a U.S.-backed initiative targeting transnational crime. Washington is also seeking stronger ties with Peru, a key producer of copper and critical minerals. Peru is also a strategic partner in countering China's regional influence. And President Trump visits a historic General Motors facility in Michigan. The president says tariffs and other measures are helping revive the U.S. auto industry while warning about the dangers of communism ahead of Michigan's primary elections. Here's more.
President Trump visiting General Motors' Milford Proving Ground in Michigan yesterday, becoming the first sitting president to tour the historic testing facility. The president pointing to his administration's actions, including tariffs on imported vehicles, changes to electric vehicle policies, and tax incentives for American-made cars.
Today, I'm proud to say that the auto industry is back and America is back, and it's pulling Detroit and Michigan along with it.
President Trump saying the U.S. auto industry has suffered under previous trade policies.
But for decades, the auto workers and manufacturers of this great state were sold out and betrayed by globalist politicians and corrupt special interests who let other countries steal your jobs, pillage your factories, and loot the crown jewels of American industry.
Trump also touting his tariffs on foreign-made vehicles.
My policy is simple. If you make your truck or your car in a foreign country, you have to pay for the privilege of sending it into our market and making a lot of money. But if you build in a factory in Michigan or someplace in our country and make your automobiles or trucks right here in America, you pay zero tax and zero tariff. You pay zero tariff. There are no tariffs.
The president toured the nearly 4,000-acre proving ground with GM CEO Mary Barra sitting behind the wheel of some of the automobiles. President Trump praising the facility's role in automotive history.
This land bears the tire marks of every model of the legendary Chevy Corvette. It bears the scars of the first auto safety test, and that was probably pretty tough.
One retired auto worker saying President Trump has saved the U.S. auto industry.
Well, we can thank this gentleman right here for all these jobs coming back, and I hear it all the time from all my connections at all the different auto plants around the Metro Detroit area. Jobs are coming back to America.
GM says it plans to invest $16 billion in U.S. research, development, and manufacturing. With Michigan's August 4th primaries and the midterm elections approaching, President Trump also campaigned for Republican candidates. He said they're now going up against communists.
This is a serious threat because they're going to promise all sorts of things. In 1 year, the country will be absolutely bankrupt. You'll live in squalor. You'll live in fear.
Michigan gubernatorial candidate Congressman John James echoing his message, saying socialism is no longer on America's doorstep. It's inside the House. James saying his message is to defeat socialism with truth.
Next, we'll hear from Samuel Gonzalez Ruiz, a Mexican lawyer and former head of the Specialized Organized Crime Unit in Mexico's Attorney General's office, where he oversaw cases involving human trafficking networks. He's also a longtime security and criminal law expert who served as a United Nations advisor on organized crime and related issues. This interview is part of the International Heroes Wanted campaign, honoring courageous leaders, survivors, advocates, and organizations working to prevent and end human trafficking. NTD Television and the Epoch Times are proud partners of the campaign. Take a look.
Fighting trafficking in human beings in my country is really complicated. You are going against the same big structures that right now are declared narco-terrorists. My origin is that I studied in Italy, my PhD, and at that time Italy was doing the fight against mafia. So when I go back to Mexico, I began to work at the National Institute for Criminal Sciences, and right there we begin to plan to fight the cartels. Many years after that, trafficking in human beings is very focused, it's very precise. One of the problems with the Palermo Convention is that it doesn't have really the crime of trafficking to have impact in this field. You need to have a lot of political decision so that the prosecutors are supported and they do the cases. Unfortunately, Mexico is one of the worst places still now because of the activities of the cartels. Therefore, we are looking at what the U.S. government has done this year when they declare narco-terrorists the Mexican organized crime. As far as we are looking at right now, we see that it has had a tremendous impact. The Mexican government now has to have more pressure in the trafficker to finish this criminal activity. Human trafficking sometimes was looked at like if it's natural that someone is exploiting another one. And exactly as in the movement Me Too, okay, that it was a re-education of the movie industry, exactly in the same way, I look at the trafficking as a change of mentality. A lot of people, they don't know what they are doing is very close to human trafficking. Let me explain to you just with a simple thing. In Mexico, there are childs that come and ask you for begging, okay? And sometimes you look at the child and you said, oh, I will give you $1, okay? But in reality, sometimes you don't know that this child can be linked to human trafficking because he has been rented by a person to do this activity. So even if you don't know, you are promoting human trafficking, okay? And that's a piece of it. Then you buy a thing because it's cheap, but you don't understand that this thing is made with forced labor. So the cultural change is very important in the trafficking.
A former congresswoman from Mexico who fought against the cartels and human trafficking. This year, we are launching the Heroes Wanted campaign, shining a light on extraordinary people fighting in the front lines.
So go to kaleido.charity/heroeswanted, watch their stories to help amplify their impact, and vote for the hero who inspires you the most.
Coming up, a new Chicago exhibition lets visitors step inside Anne Frank's secret annex and experience one of history's most powerful stories firsthand. Welcome back. Her diary became one of the most widely read accounts of the Holocaust. As two key anniversaries in Anne Frank's story approach, an exhibition in Chicago brings history to life through a full-scale recreation of her secret hiding place. NTD's Daniel Monahan speaks with museum president Dr. Chevy Humphrey.
Behind a hidden bookshelf door in Amsterdam, a teenage girl and 7 others spent 2 years living in fear, afraid that one wrong sound could mean discovery by Nazis. Now visitors to Griffin Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago can step inside a full-scale recreation of that hidden annex, walking through the same cramped rooms where Anne Frank wrote the diary that would later be read by millions around the world.
Many people will not have the opportunities to go to Amsterdam to see the exhibition, and so we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity for people to see it here. In addition, we wanted to present the exhibition so that school children could be able to learn more about Anne's story.
Anne Frank, the exhibition, was developed by the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, but this version offers something visitors to the original museum won't see.
The house in Amsterdam was left the way the Nazis left the house, and it was mostly unfurnished. In this exhibition, the annex is meticulously designed and furnished the way that Otto Frank recalled when they lived in the annex. So you will be able to see each room furnished so that you can understand the small spaces in which they had to live in the annex.
In the exhibition, you'll find out more about how the Franks moved from Germany to Amsterdam and learn about their horrific experience in the Holocaust.
They were in the attic, and most during the day, they had to be silent because no one could hear them in the annex. And they literally had to be very careful. And then at night, they could move around a bit and be able to socialize.
The museum is offering free entry to the exhibit for all field trip groups from across the country. Every school child will also receive their own diary so they can write and reflect on their thoughts about the world around them.
Because we still need that message of resilience and hope, even in our world today. There's a quote that's attributed to Anne Frank that says, we need not wait one single moment before improving this world. And we're hoping that every visitor finds their own agency on how they make this world a better place.
Visitors to the exhibit will see more than 130 artifacts, many displayed publicly for the first time.
There's a gramophone that is like a record player that that Otto Frank gave to Margot and to Anne. And what it does, it connects our young people to say, wow, they listened to music. They wanted to enjoy their lives, but it was cut short because of hate.
The exhibition's Chicago run comes as two meaningful anniversaries approach. August 1st marks the date of Anne's final diary entry, and August 4th marks the day the annex was discovered in 1944. To learn more, visit griffinmsi.org. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com or download our NTD app. I'm Stephanie Cox. Stay tuned.